Are we on, guys? Can I get a thumbs up from someone?
We got you, Jeremy.
Oh, you got me. All right, sweet. Hey, it is awesome to be with you guys today. I'm like sitting here in my own world, jotting some notes down and realizing Russ's cue from me is push the mute button. So, guys, I'm so pumped to be with you right now and excited to be spending a few minutes with you today on this wonderful Monday. Yeah, so I hope everyone's doing great. Ready to dive right into some good stuff that I've been focusing on with so many agents as I've been spending some time in some meetings and some phone calls and just looking at what is our approach and trying to decide which area I want to start from first. I've shared this video or I've shared this story before from a book called Living with a Seal. Some of you may have heard this before. It's a great, great book. I always have a hard time recommending because it does have some bad language. But the book is called Living with a Seal. It's written by the owner of, I think it was NetJets or something like that. He owns the Atlanta Falcons. His name is Jesse Itzler. And Jesse Itzler created this company. And he's just like this very, very wealthy, very driven guy. If you get on Instagram and follow him, just does fun stuff. He's also very into fitness. And he does these like 100-mile runs and stuff. And it's really interesting. And basically one day he was at one of these 100-mile runs and he met a guy there that was doing it all by himself. It was like a 4-person team event. And there was one guy all by himself. And he's like, oh my gosh, I need to learn more from this guy. So he goes to this guy. Oh, Allison, you need to mute yours. There we go. All good. And he went through, met this guy, said, I want to train with you for 30 days. Come live with me in New York City. He has a house right across, like a high rise across from Central Park. And turns out the guy, the SEAL, is former Navy SEAL and fitness guy himself, David Goggins, the guy who wrote Can't Hurt Me. Great book as well. Bad language, but incredible story and book. Actually, if you can listen to the audio version, it's crazy because he tells more into each story. Anyway, Living with a Seal. Jesse Itzler has this guy who's a psychopath, like crazy, intense guy. And he shows up to his house and said, I'll come and live with you for a month and train you for 1 month if there's one condition, which is you'll do everything I tell you to do, no matter what. And the guy says, sure, I'll do it. So he says, first days first, he shows up and Jesse Itzler's like, all right, we have a house guest. We're going to bring him into our nice New York high rise. We're going to feed him a nice meal. We're going to get to know him a little bit. Work starts tomorrow. The guy shows up in the house, basically drops his bag and says, hey, where's the gym? And Jesse's like, cool, I'm going to go give him a tour of the gym where we'll be spending some time. They go down into the gym and Jesse Itzler is showing him everything. And he says, how many pull-ups can you do? Now, keep in mind, the guy, David Goggins, has the world record for pull-ups done in a single day, I think. And Jesse Itzler says, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that. He says, do them. So Jesse Itzler gets up, does his pull-up, says by the time he's getting to 10 or 11, he's like swinging on the bar to try to get his chin over the bar and finally gets his 10, 11, or 12 done. And he says, all right, now I want you to do 100 of them. So thrown off a bit here, he thinks they're going to have a nice dinner and relaxing evening. And now he's being told you need to do 100 pull-ups. And he's like, yeah, sorry, I can't do 100 pull-ups. I physically cannot do that. And he said, it would take me hours or days. He's like, I didn't put a time frame on it. I just told you to do 100 pull-ups. And one of the conditions of me doing this is that you would do exactly what I say. So the first thing I'm telling you to do, you're saying no. And Jesse Itzler's like, all right. So guys, the story goes on where he's just trying to do 100 pull-ups and he's saying it's painful. He's got the lactic acid. He's got everything is just so hard. Basically, he's doing like a pull-up and then walking around for 5 minutes. Another pull-up or two, walking around for 5 minutes, shaking out his arms. Eventually, I think it took him 3 or 4 hours. He does 100 pull-ups. And the great message there was, wow, you can do more than you think you can do. You can accomplish more than you think you can accomplish. What does it require? Well, it requires a desire. It requires the ability, right? It requires the creativity to figure it out. It requires the time, right? That became a requirement in this instance. But the big message and most motivating factor behind the whole thing to me was you can do more than you think you can. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get it done. If you haven't read that book, go and read it. It's so good. But as I've thought about that, and I think about our current market conditions, look, we're in a time frame right now that requires more of us. It requires more creativity. It requires more ingenuity. It requires probably more sacrifice, time, effort, and energy. The other day on the Morning Ascent, if any of you are participating, I spoke about the sacrifices that are required of an entrepreneur starting their business. And I used the thought that, look, some of you and many of us right now, it's sort of like starting over in some ways because you're figuring out how to make it happen right now. And what's your new approach? So the big encouragement right now for me is just to say, look, you can do this. You can accomplish more than you believe you can, even at this moment. And you can do hard things. I know you can. And kudos to you for showing up and participating today just to engage in this. One of the topics that's been on my mind a lot in this past week, simply because I've been talking to a lot of agents about it, is the idea of pre-qualifying people, specifically getting people to sign the buyer agency agreement right from the start so that you have the highest chance of protecting your time and energy. So think about this for a moment. I'm not going to use the whiteboard. There's a huge glare on it, but think about a bank right now. When we talk about qualifying, pre-qualifying, pre-approval, right? We're talking and thinking mostly financial. We're thinking about a bank that is pre-qualifying someone to use their money, meaning what can you show a bank that has them say, this person's a good investment? Well, what are they going to ask for? They're going to be asking you for bank statements, assets, liabilities. They're going to be asking you for check stubs, work history, verification of current employment. They're going to be checking your credit score. I mean, think about all of the things that get done in order for a bank to finally say, right, yes, this works. They're going to have a loan officer, a processor, an underwriter, a final underwriting, a final credit check, a final check on their final credit check, and a final check on the employment the moment before they hit send on those funds, right? Because that asset is so important to them, and they must show that they're doing everything to protect it. Well, when I look at a real estate agent and someone in the world of sales, and we talk about the idea of pre-qualifying someone, we're talking about the asset that you have, not of money, right? But what creates the money, which is your time, your talents, your energy. And how committed are you to protecting your time? I've said this for years, that your ability and your willingness to pre-qualify someone is a direct reflection on how you value your time. So as you consider for a moment about how you do value your time and what that means, when we look at pre-qualification, we're going to be looking at similar things. Like, you're not pulling people's credit. You're not out getting a document signed to verify their employment. But what you are doing is you're trying to understand, what's your motivation? What is your motivation? Anybody here ever shown homes to someone because they like looking at homes? I've done that, unfortunately, and I didn't figure it out until I was on my third Friday night in a row, date night for this couple, because they just loved looking at homes. Were they going to buy or sell? Maybe, right? If the right deal came up, guess what? This was 15 years ago. They're still in the same house. I know that for a fact. It was date night for them. And I was a real estate agent. My job was to show homes. So they figured Jeremy's doing his job. Guys, I did a horrible job of pre-qualifying them. And I didn't care about my time as much as I needed to at the moment. Next, so when we look at that, we're going to be finding out, what is their motivation? What is their driving force? How serious are they? Like, what are their intentions? Are they really serious? Do they really intend to purchase a home, right? Or if it's a listing, do they really intend to sell this property? How motivated are they really? So once you've figured out motivation, you want to look at their abilities, right? Are they capable? So if you're looking at a buyer, you're going to be talking for a moment about, okay, well, can you actually qualify, right? Have you talked to a lender? Do you have good credit? You might not be pulling their credit, but boy, I ask people all the time, hey, tell me, do you have an idea of what your credit score is at? How long have you had your job? Hey, is there anything that's happened in the last few years? Judgments, a bankruptcy, collections, anything that might be affecting your credit negatively? I will ask people that because it's essential for you in the way in which you protect your time, your asset, the same way a bank would. Sorry, I'm trying to not let the table shake here. Next, the abilities of a seller. Let's talk about that for a moment. And in fact, this one's so important, I would write this down if I were you. What are the abilities of a seller? So somebody may be motivated to buy or sell. They might say, oh, I'm desperate to get out of here. I really want to make a move. Okay, that's one thing. They might sell you on the motivation, but can they sell you on the ability, right? Just because someone says, I would really love to move into this 10,000 square foot mansion with a swimming pool and a tennis court, who wouldn't love that? Who wouldn't be motivated to do that? But are you capable of accomplishing that? Remember, capable, able. Are you able? Is it in your ability to qualify? Is it in your ability to actually perform? When you look at a seller standpoint and you're looking at what are the seller's abilities? Hey, look, we might be moving into a market here down the road with all these huge inflation and prices and all of that. Look, generally, the next step is going to be that people owe more on their homes than they're currently worth. And you start down this path where there are short sales, foreclosures, things of that nature. And when we get into that world, this conversation I'm about to have even becomes more important. Have you ever heard a seller say something to the effect of, I'm not in a rush, right? Everyone's heard that. And they actually are in a rush. We've all heard that. Well, let's talk about what are the abilities of a seller. And it's my belief that these are really the only abilities of a seller. And everything else maybe is like a spoke from off of it, but pretty much the same ability. So let's talk about it. A seller can, and if you have a pen and a paper, write these down. The seller can, number one, sell their home using cash or the equity they have in their home, right? So when you're pre-qualifying someone to know, do they have the actual ability to sell? You're going to first find out how much do they owe on the house? And what if the house is worth $500,000 or $800,000 and they owe $795,000? Are they able to sell? Well, only if they have cash in the bank, right? Only if there's cash in the bank to make up for paying commissions, closing costs, and all that other good stuff. So keep that in mind. So they can either use number one, cash or equity. Same thing's true if someone owes $400,000, but the house is worth $800,000. Are they able? The answer is yes. They are able. That's part of the ability. Okay, so cash to close or the equity in the house. Number two, I maybe should have started with this. Stay in the house, right? Are they able to stay in the house? Well, that goes back to the motivation, right? So I'm going to back up. I'm going to say that's number one. Put it above it. Stay. Number one, stay in the house. Can they stay? Some people can't. I'll never forget going to a listing appointment in Provo, Utah, where the husband was living in Nashville, Tennessee. The wife and their three young children were at home alone. And the husband tried to say to us at one point, yeah, I'm not in any rush. I just need to get the most money out of this. And you look to the left of him and see his poor wife. And it was like, we had a very honest conversation there about wait a minute. Can you wait? Can you really wait? And it was interesting to see the room change where it was no longer salesperson trying to persuade somebody into something. It became like, oh, this is Jeremy. He's here to help me. He's here to work with us and accomplish some stuff. He's talking to us very real about our abilities. And it was a great moment, but they didn't have the ability to stay in the home. Their family was moving to Nashville, Tennessee, and the wife needed to get there as soon as humanly possible. Very interesting discussion. Same thing can be true if someone's moving. It could be the same thing if they need to get to another location. Could be the same thing for health reasons that they don't have the ability to stay. It could be, sold homes for people who are older, and it's like, I can't continue to maintain this 4,000 square foot home on a half an acre, right? So they don't have the ability to remain. Next might be financial. Many people who financially just, I can't afford it any longer. So they must come up with solutions. So be thinking about that as you consider the option of staying. Make sure you're talking about that. So the abilities of a seller: number one, to stay; number two, to use cash or equity to get the home sold; number three, rent. Every seller has the ability to rent their home. Actually, not everyone does because of an HOA probably, but think about it. Renting is an option. Okay, so let's use the guy from Tennessee as an example again. We brought this up as an option to him. Can you rent your house? Well, you could, but back then the rents were going to put him at a deficit of $400 a month. Can you afford to pay $400 a month? Or what if it's equal money, but can you afford when the furnace goes out, you need to replace the furnace? Can you afford when the tenant leaves and you have to recarpet and repaint? Can you afford, right? You start going through these things and you realize either A, I don't have the ability, or B, I'm not interested in. So it's not an option. So you think about that. These are the options or the abilities that any seller may have. So back to the top, they can stay in the house. They can use cash or equity to sell the home. Number three, they can, I just said this one, sorry, I'm having a mind blank. I've got notifications coming up on top of my screen and it threw me off. So, okay, stay, rent back, stay, use cash or equity, or rent the house. Do they want to do that? No, many don't. So now we move to fourth. The next ability is to short sell the property. Look, right now in our current market conditions, there's not going to be a lot of people that are in need of having to even consider a short sell because values are through the roof. But it's still something that could be an issue, and it's still something that ought to be considered. And it's still an option, one of the 5 abilities of a seller, okay, to short sell the property. For those of you who don't know, because it's not something that we've been using a lot, but basically, this is when the bank arranges with the current homeowner to sell the home short of what is owed to them. And other arrangements are made to make up for the deficiency in that. And I promise you over the coming years, we'll talk a lot more about short sales, but right now it's not a huge thing. And then of course, fifth and finally, a homeowner has the ability to do a foreclosure. So those are the 5 abilities that any seller has. They can stay in the house, use cash or equity to sell it, rent the house, short sell the house, or have the house foreclosed upon. And it's interesting when you sit with someone like this guy from Tennessee that's living in Tennessee that I was telling you about. His family's home. They have equity in the house. He's living in Tennessee. His wife's here. Renting is not an option. You just go through those options. Can you stay? No, we cannot stay. Our life is in Tennessee now. Okay, no problem. Do you have equity in your house in order to be able to sell? Yes, we do. But I'm only going to sell it for X amount or else I'm not doing it. Okay, good to know. Now, he thinks in his mind he has another option there, right? Because he said, if I don't sell it for this much, then I'm not selling. So he believes there's a new option. That's why it's so important that you go, Well, here are your options. Stay, use the cash or equity, okay? But if he says there's conditions to that, then you go to the third one and you say, well, do you want to rent it then? If you can't get the money that you want out of it, will you rent the house? No, we're not going to rent it. We can't afford that. We can't. Okay, so that's not an option. You can't short sell it because you're not having to short sell. You could stop making payments and foreclose upon it, but that's ridiculous. Your option, your ability right now is to use cash and equity to close on this house. And it's interesting when you walk through that process and someone goes, oh, yeah, that is my only option. And I need to figure out the best way to accomplish that. Guys, this is a great way for you to qualify people for your time when you work through this process and making sure that they do have the ability. Now, I'm sharing all 5 of those with you right now because you'll have the opportunity to discuss this with sellers over the years. Right now, only a few of them are going to be really applicable in current circumstances, but knowing those 5 things are really, really valuable. Okay, so when working with anyone to qualify them for your time, you're starting with the motivation. Now you've talked about the ability, right? And once you know, well, they have the motivation, they have the ability to accomplish this. So far we're 2 for 2. I'm willing to spend my time, energies, efforts, talents with this person. Number 3, you want to look at their commitment. This is where signatures on paper become critical for you, is making sure that you know, and these are the words that I like to use, that they're just as committed to you as you are to them. So as you look at that, this is where a buyer-broker agreement comes in play on a buyer side. And on the seller side, the exclusive right to sell. It's kind of an interesting world that we live in. As a general statement, when you look at sellers, look, you're going to get the exclusive right to sell. You're going to list the house and you have a client, right? It gets a little different when you're talking about the buyer-broker agreement. If I were to go around right now and say, how many of you, and right or wrong on this, I'm not, probably I'd just say it's wrong, but I'm just letting you know that if I were in a room with 100 agents and said, how many of you have one client right now that you're showing homes to? I'd bet you 95% of that room would raise their hand. Perfect, right? And then if I were to say, how many of you have a buyer agency agreement signed with that client? Boy, all you have to do is look at yourself and your own situation right now. How many of you have those signed with every person that you're working with right now? Guys, this is one of the most critical elements of your ability to work with people and your ability to ensure that your time, energy, and efforts are not gone for nothing. And so I want to talk about that. When you're on the phone with a buyer, it's my encouragement that after you've created value, after they know your motivation, after they know what you want to accomplish and all of that good stuff, I think it's essential that you find the opportunity to find out their willingness to sign a buyer agency agreement. When I do that, it goes something like this. Hey, when we meet tonight, I'll be bringing with me what's called a buyer agency agreement. This agreement allows me to spend my time and energy showing you properties, knowing that when it comes time to write an offer, I'll be the agent that does that for you. Okay? And they'll say, okay. And they've now committed to signing your agency agreement. Then when you meet with them at the house, you show up and you have your agency agreement and you say, here's the agreement that we talked about on the phone. Give them a brief rundown of what the agreement is. And then you say, I just need your initials here and here and a signature here, and then we'll jump into the house. In an ideal world, guys, that's how you perform on getting a buyer agency agreement signed. I understand that many of you will have questions, ideas, or other philosophies about how that may work. But one of the most painful things that happens far too often is I'm talking to a real estate agent that says, hey, I just got hosed by these buyers. They totally messed me over. I've shown them 100 homes and they found this for sale by owner. Oh, bummer. Did you get a buyer broker signed? No. Who's lived that before? Guys, I could be the first one to raise my hand and say I've been there. And unfortunately, for some reason, as real estate agents, we have to sometimes decide to learn lessons the hard way. It's happened more than once. And finally, I had to draw a line in the sand to say, I will not waste my time and my talents, my energy on someone that's absolutely not committed to me. So when you talk about a buyer agency agreement, my encouragement to you today is to be just absolutely committed to making sure that you get people to sign these agreements with you. Now, look, I've got one here from Utah in my possession right now. It says right at the very top, this is a legally binding agreement. Read carefully before signing. Okay? Is it totally far-fetched for someone that shows up and is like, I don't want to sign something with you? Here's where we have to find. We have one end of the spectrum, which is that I want this form signed because it protects my time, energy, and effort. You have the other end of a spectrum of someone that might be saying, I'm so scared to sign something and be stuck with an agent for 6 months that won't work on my behalf. So what I can tell you is that 90+% of people, in my experience, when you say the script the right way, assume the sale, that they will say yes and they'll sign the agreement. Happens all day, every day in this company. But as you look at this, there's other elements that are essential. This form is not just for you. And I apologize to any of our California people. I'm going to assume that you have very similar language that we have. But when you go through this form and you look at what are the duties of a buyer agent, boy, can you imagine the great value in place for someone that is looking for a real estate agent and looking for a home? Think about, on top of, I just met with some people not too long ago that were upset about a situation, and interesting to visit with them and say, what is our current circumstance with our current agent? We just want to do it on our own, is their attitude. Well, that's tricky. So if you have 10 homes you want to see, you're going to call 10 different real estate agents and set up 10 showings in a row. I mean, we can talk all day and night about that. But outside of those elements, listen to what the contract actually states. Again, this is Utah. I know California has something similar. As agents for the buyer, the buyer's agent and broker have fiduciary duties to the buyer that include loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and any other duties required by law. If you're looking for something to help say to somebody the great value that working with you is on the buyer side, it's staring you right in the face in that contract. Familiarize yourself with your buyer agency agreement, guys. Know it backward and forward, and have the ability to step up and to be able to sell people on why they should be working with you, why this form isn't just a protection to you. Then in the meantime, look, again, 99% of people are going to be more than willing to sign the buyer agency agreement with you, which allows you to spend your time and energy showing homes, knowing that they're just as committed to you as you are to them. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're going through the document, that they're aware of all the different points. What are the, all of that good stuff. You've got to obviously do your job. You say, sure it's clear. Whoa, music. Is that my cutoff right there? I could keep singing that song, by the way. Anyway, okay, so making sure you know and you're familiar with this document, getting it signed, getting the agreement. If someone is unwilling to sign it, and I was talking about the spectrum early, just remember this. The key element of this is knowing that you have the ability to earn someone's business. If someone's not willing to sign a 3-page legal document with a stranger, don't take that personally. Figure out if you actually have the ability to get them to earn their business. Make sure you know for certain that you have the ability to earn their business. And that's what is so critical. And when you know that you have the ability to earn their business, it's easier to say something like, well, look, let's focus on finding you the right house. Am I safe to assume that as long as you feel confident that I'm always working on your behalf and that you like working with me, that we can get this form signed at a later day, they're going to say yes. If they say no, try to understand, well, what's your concern? What's your hesitation? I've gone as far as to say, hey, look, this form is mutually beneficial for both of us because of what it gets you. On my end as well, after you've talked about fiduciary, on my end, it helps me know how committed you are to me. And it helps me know that my time, energy, and efforts are never going to go to waste. For example, I showed somebody homes, 15 homes, 20 homes. And when it came time to write an offer, suddenly their aunt, the grandma, my wife's sister, my husband's uncle, whoever, they're a real estate agent. So we're going to work through them. Look, you can talk all you want about procuring cause and all of this stuff. The bottom line is that that's how you can get hosed quickly. So I've gone again as far as to say to people, hey, this is where I've had a hard time in the past, where I've worked and done A, B, C, and D, and then somebody else snuck in the side. I just want to know from you, and you're looking them in the eyes at this point, possibly on a phone call, saying, do I have a realistic chance of earning your business? And if someone can look you in the eyes and say, yes, of course you do, or, hey, as long as I can show you that I'm going to work on your behalf and represent you well and I'm available, I'm assuming you'll sign this at a future date, correct? And they'll say yes. But if it's a no, guys, don't work through it. You've got to create rules for your business. But if you value your time, you're not going to allow yourself to get into a relationship like that that's only going to end in disappointment. And here's the reality. Are there a few deals that you might miss out along the way? Yeah. I'd be lying if I tried to say that's not the case. But you're going to have a lot more heartache not being committed to getting assigned, not being committed to pre-qualifying than you are the opposite side of things. So guys, I just want to encourage you, get committed to getting your people to sign their agency agreements, getting committed to protecting your time, your efforts, your energies. And as you do so, great things are going to happen in your business. And thank you so much for participating today, guys. Love spending time with you. And Russ, cue the Beatles, man. Let's do it. That's it.